Cool, so we're back recording. So now we're going to look at the basic guard, or one of the basic guards. So I'm just going to move back a bit so you can see my feet. But the first guard we're going to learn is the medium guard, and then I'm going to talk you through some of the other guards in the system. The reason I'm starting with the medium guard is that's the easiest guard to teach from or to learn from. So once once you know that, we'll be using that for the rest of the night for the rest of the drills. But there are other guards in this system, which I do encourage you to sort of play with time. So to start off with, I want to start with your feet in an L, with your heels in line, or forming a line between your back heel, your front heel, and the toes of your front foot or your sword side foot. And that line that you're forming with your feet is the center line for fencing. You line up by your feet. You don't want to line up by the middle of your body because your sword is on one side of your body. All right. And from here, you step till you're about 2 foot widths apart. Some people prefer a narrower stance. Some people prefer a wider stance. I think 2 foot widths is a good kind of, there's no one who doesn't like 2 foot widths apart. And just sink down till you're nice and balanced, till you've got a good bend in your legs. The reason why you want to bend down is basically if you stand upright like this, you're either going to do one of two things. One is you're going to make these very big lumpy steps, which are very committed, very slow, and move. You need to move your whole body, so they're not very good, efficient ways of moving. Alternatively, when you go to move, you're going to bend your knees, move, and then come back upright. And that means that you've got 1, 2 redundant movements in your attack, which you just don't need. So you might as well just start in a low, comfortable stance. How low? As low as you can comfortably sit in long term, or as low as you can move in quite easily. When we get to footwork, it'll start to feel more obvious what the correct amount of bend is. I say this having discovered that doing squats in an on guard position is amazing exercise, which I did way too many of yesterday, and now my legs are sore. All right, so with your sword, now that you've got your stance, nice knees bent, I want you to take your sword, just raise it above your head. Then we're going to bend our back hand or back arm into about 90 degrees and put it with our fist clenched on our hip. So this keeps it nice and out of the way, and just kind of back, but also ready to spring into action if we need it. Front arm is going to bend 90 degrees. The arm's going to come down, so the elbow is sitting a couple of centimeters away from the ribs. You don't want it pressed against your ribs. You want it just nice, comfortably out. You want your forearm to be pretty much horizontal, and you want your sword out so that the tip is pointing at roughly where your opponent's throat would be if you had an opponent. The way I like to think of it is your tip must be low enough that if you extend, you'll thrust forward. So if you've got an opponent in front of you, extend your arm, you'll thrust them without needing to adjust the height of your tip. But you've also, if you need to chop them, just give a quick chop to, say, their sword arm, you've got your tip is high enough to do that. So if you're like this, your tip is too high to thrust properly, even though you can cut. If you're like this, your tip is too low to cut properly, even though you can thrust. So you want kind of a nice happy medium, a bit of something for everyone, the thrusty and the choppy people. All right, and this is our medium guard. So the other guards of the system that we've seen covered. There's the tierce guard. So all I've done is move my hand out so that it's sitting at this angle, which is the same angle as cut number 2, and also the tip of the parry, which we'll see later. But the tip is still at the same height. Something you see in a lot of 19th century systems is a parry. The tip is high, so that your opponent can't skim over it. With a guard, the tip is low, pointed at your opponent. This is for both thrusting swords and common thrust swords. This is the tierce guard. My hand is also in line with the outer edge of my body, like this, because I need to cover that line. On the other guards you get is what's termed the low hanging guard, or sometimes just the hanging guard when the high hanging guard is kind of abandoned. But my hand is held basically at shoulder height. My hand is on one side of my body, my blade or my tip is on the other, so that my sword is covering my body. And depending on the weapon, it's extended about this much. So not all the way back here, not all the way out, probably about halfway between. And this is quite a, generally speaking, something that Alison Lynn says, and also a few other authors, is when you're facing off against someone else with either a cutlass or a saber, you want to use the Tierce Guard because it gives more versatility. If you're against a thrusting weapon like a bayonet or an épée, you want the low hanging guard. And the reason is basically, if I'm using low hanging guard, thrust is either going to come low, in which case I parry it like that, or high, in which case I parry it like that. And depending on where your opponent is pointed at and how you're engaged, you probably know where, so you've made your attack very predictable. Whereas when you're against someone who's got a saber or a broadsword or a cutlass, or really any other cut and thrust sword, from here, from Tierce, you've got a lot more versatility. You can do a lot more things, which gives you a lot more options of how you attack. All right, so those are the basic guards. We're just going to be using the medium guard from here on out. But before we move on, are there any questions? Oh.